This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I had a message on Instagram from a chap called Ramsay. It's raw! He was basically asking some things that I thought some of you guys might jive with, maybe have similar sort of questions. So I wanted to kind of give a point of view on whether or not you should bother learning jazz or whether it's worth it. Just wondered if there are any courses you'd recommend for learning jazz theory, and the reason that he was kind of interested, was I'm not looking to get too high on jazz, just enough to broaden my horizons. 30 years of playing Satch, and prodigy, and it is time. And so I thought I'd kind of, answer this, because I thought it's, for me, quite similar. So he said seeing Satch at Expo 92 in Seville made me want to pick up the 6-string cricket bat. And the first full song he learnt to play was Surfing. And so I thought that's roughly similar to my trajectory. Now, I think I'm about 10 years younger than Gordon, but let's talk about it a bit. I think it does get to a stage where, so even if you're like playing guitar semi or even professionally, the actual material itself that you're mostly playing is not super complicated a lot of the time. I don't know if you find this the same in what you do, but like if you're playing like rock tunes or you're playing disco or soul or a lot of pop music, it is fairly simple-ish to play. And the other side of things is with things like Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and Dream Theater, those are like the polar opposite, whereas like actually pretty much all of this stuff is like pretty difficult to play. And I can remember a lot of time, certainly when I started filming videos, would be spent trying to get a part up to speed and all of that sort of stuff, and kind of exhausting, and you'd end up with tears on your fingers, and you play the thing well or well enough one time, and then it's kind of like, well, that was exhausting, and then what? So I think for me the thing is that jazz music, I think as we grow up a little bit, can be something else which we can put a different sort of energy into, maybe, but also a thing that makes a lot of the other music stuff, like pop music and all of that stuff, feel really simple from a harmonic point of view, and that's a kind of a benefit of the jazz stuff, in my opinion. I'm assuming that anyone asking this question is probably old enough where, realistically, are we going to be the next Joe Pass or whatever, the next child prodigy or the next prodigy or the next Julian Large? Realistically, maybe not. But there are plenty of our, favourite pro players who make a little bit of jazz go a long way, is the way that I've kind of like to think about this. And so some of my favourite players, whether they're Eric Johnson, Andy Timmons, a lot of my favourite players, as I would say, would make a little bit of jazz go a long way. It's not like Eric Johnson is necessarily a jazzist, but like you can hear there's some jazz in his playing, or you can see that he's done sort of playing with Mike Stern where he can sort of hang, and that's kind of the way I like to think about it. We might be a rock or a blues player or whatever style of player, adding a little bit of jazz in there can often be quite a nice thing. Robin Ford, I think of, Larry Carlton, where they're not necessarily straight ahead jazz players. Yes, Robin Ford played with Miles Davis, but it was kind of in the fusion era, and you know, I've not seen Robin before doing like straightforward standards playing and stuff like that. So I think there is this really nice idea for me in jazz where you could tap into this vein of like standards playing and the classics and all that sort of stuff, and you'll have like a really big pool of tunes that you might never have heard, that you might find really beautiful. You'll have like a new window of harmony which is a little bit more complex in a lot of ways than the sort of progressions that we get in pop music. Hopefully acquainted with some sort of new artists that you like. So for me, there's people like Peggy Lee and Chet Baker, and you know, then even jazz guitarist Jonathan Kreisberg, Gilad Hexelman, all of this sort of stuff where you start to develop some taste in this. But it's like a whole new world, and I think it also suits growing up a little bit as well. So, you know, the jazz-friendly middle-aged guy, I think that's a thing. Yes, the best piece of advice I had, so I was someone who kind of, you know, talking about jazz theory and stuff, I came at it from the side of like Hal Leonard books and stuff like that before I'd ever really started listening to jazz. And I think that's kind of the topsy-turvy way to go about it. So where I would start would be listen to a bit of jazz and try and learn a few jazz tunes. And this came for me from a piece of Jonathan Kreisberg interview where he had basically said that he missed getting into a school or something like that. He failed the audition or whatever, or just wasn't selected. And he had a mentor that basically said to him, look, over the next year, learn a tune a week, and by the end of that year, you'll have 52 tunes. And that's actually a really solid piece of advice. One of the things that I think people have a bit of a misconception of is that, like, jazz players are able to play every single tune, or, you know, that it's all about the real book and all this sort of stuff. Actually, when you look at some of your favourite jazz players, once you develop them, actually the catalogue, you start to strip it down a little bit more, and people will have been playing the same tune for a long time. So it's not necessarily about knowing 300, 400 tunes inside out, but having, you know, a selection of tunes that you really dig and give you the energy to check them out is a really good starting point. So I would pick a tune a week, find a version by someone that you like, whether it's like Chet Baker, Peggy Lee, it can be whoever, right? Might be Bill Evans. But first of all, I would listen to it with vocals so that you can start to hear in your head what that melody was and tie it to some lyrics. You can use the real book if you want to, but for me, I would use that first couple of days just trying to figure it out with my ears. And this is where the benefit can come with this jazz, is because then if you're listening to harmonically complex music and you're able to kind of pick it out from that, then the normal sort of stuff that we learn for sessions and you know, other playing, it's really a doddle to play over stuff that stays in the same key all the time, or to learn, you know, chord changes that stay in the same key all the time. So the only downside to this, I think, is that I thought I was really into jazz, and then I went to some jazz gigs. And for me personally, there's actually a side of jazz which I really like, and then a lot of it which kind of turns me off, which is actually okay. For me, I found that the kind of jazz tunes that I like tend to be ballads, and I really kind of like the sort of classic style, not getting too modern with it and not getting too carried away. There are some players out there that I think carry some of those same sentiments that I enjoy, because Gordon did ask about on truefire. I would say Adam Levy, Tim Lurch are two guys that I would kind of look into if I was interested in this sort of jazz playing. Martin Taylor as well, I think, has got a course on there. But these kind of more chill, mature guys that are maybe playing more accessible sort of jazz gigs than the really far out there stuff would be my kind of advice. What I think is some of the benefit with this is that things that are commonplace commonplace in jazz, you really don't find too much in pop music, and so it is a really good way to sort of, as Gordon said, like broaden your horizons a bit. And I would say that, not to toot my own horn too much, I think I've put together a few chord melodies that might be useful on my Patreon. If you're looking for like accessible jazz standards that you can get into, I used to do this thing where taking a song every single week, and I've put up chord melodies of some of those. So whether it was something like Autumn Leaves, that's kind of my approach with stuff, is to kind of make the melody very much the framework. And I wouldn't say, like, I think there is a bit of a misconception that you need to know tons of theories for jazz, for jazz, or tons of scales. I think if you have a good grasp of the major scale, and you have a fairly decent grasp of the melodic minor scale, you can get a fairly long way with this. Just knowing that most of what jazz is, you know, for the stuff that I'm into, is basically just moving through chord progressions through a few different keys. That is more or less, you know, like 2-5-1s. Like, it's not loads and loads of really exotic scales, just sort of most of it you could play through. Without too much sort of super theory. So if that's a thing that you're worried about, I wouldn't be too worried about it. And I would come at it from the approach of, right, I'm going to learn some jazz tunes and find some things that you really like to listen to. So for me, Misty is a really good one. Anyway, yeah, that's a really good one. Autumn Leaves, or you might learn it in G minor. That could be a really good starting point. For me, there was benefit to learning this jazz stuff. It's not something I spend too much time on at the moment, but I think it's something I'll probably get more into as I have more time, maybe once I get a bit older, once Elodie has grown up a bit more. I think it's one of those things that once you open that door a little bit and get your foot in a tiny bit, and I think the best way is just to learn a few jazz tunes and see if you can, you know, grab a few tunes that really speak to you. An ES335 is a good bet for playing jazz on, but equally a Tele or Strat is perfectly reasonable. Just use the neck pickup, dial back the tone a little bit, and you're good to go. Don't worry too much about the gear in this stuff. Don't worry too much about loads of scales. I would start off by trying to learn some chord melody, a few like different chord shapes. You'll find that a little of this goes quite a long way, is what I would say, and maybe it influences some of your playing in other genres, like if you're a Josh Smith, a Robin Ford, people like that, Eric Johnson. But it can really be, I think, a nice sort of window into some new playing as you get maybe a little bit tired of trying to play like Vi. Maybe. I hope this was helpful, Gordon. I hope it might have been helpful for one or two others of you. I was playing over Misty in this intro that I'm about to do, and the chord melody for that is up on my Patreon. If you're interested in that, £2 a month, you get access to all of my chord melodies. There's a bunch of them that I've done over the years. I hope that's interesting to you. And if you've got requests for jazz tunes that you think I should be doing, then please email me them and I'll take a look at those. Cheers for stopping by.